The planet was dead. No wind, no sound, just endless stretches of blackened rock under a dark sky. It had no name, just a catalog number, XR57. The human expedition team had landed an hour ago, their boots crunching softly against the brittle ground. Commander Hayes led the group, his helmet visor reflecting the dull glow of their shoulder lights. "Scanners picking up anything?" he asked. "Just ruins," Lieutenant Carter replied. He adjusted his wrist display, scanning the massive stone structures ahead. No life, no energy signatures. Whatever lived here, it's long gone. The ruins were ancient, their walls cracked and eroded by time. Strange markings covered the surfaces, symbols from a language no one had ever seen. They felt wrong, almost unnatural. Hayes stepped forward, running a gloved hand over the stone. It was cold. Not the kind of cold from space exposure, but something deeper, something that felt lifeless in a way he couldn't explain. Then the distress beacon activated. A sharp, high-pitched signal burst through their comms, causing static to crackle in their ears. "What the hell?" Carter winced, adjusting his earpiece. "That's not us," Corporal Diaz said. His eyes darted to his scanner, which was now flickering with interference. Hayes frowned. "If it's not us, then who sent it?" Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath them vibrated. A deep guttural hum resonated through the ruins. The walls trembled. Dust fell from above. And then, a door opened. Not a normal door. No hinges, no creaking, no mechanical movement. It simply split, like reality itself had been cut open. A swirling darkness lay beyond, pulsing like a living void. Carter raised his weapon. "Commander, I don't think we should go in." Hayes stared at the doorway, a pit forming in his stomach. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, but they had a mission. Exploration. Discovery. Understanding the unknown. "Stay alert," he ordered. "We're going in." The team stepped inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, the sound vanished. No comms, no breathing. Just silence. Their lights barely pierced the darkness, revealing a massive chamber lined with alien technology. And then they saw it. In the center of the room stood a structure, humming with a low vibration. It wasn't broken, wasn't abandoned. It was active. Screens flickered with unreadable text, strange holograms shifting in the air. Carter stepped forward, raising his scanner. His voice came through the comms, shaky. "Commander, this thing. It's not old. It's running diagnostics." Hayes' breath caught. Diagnostics? On what? Before Carter could answer, the room came alive. The walls pulsed, screens flashed red, and an eerie mechanical voice filled their helmets. "ERRR. Unauthorized. Presence DETCTE. INITYALIS NGKOMTRMEASURES." A piercing shriek tore through the room. The ground shook violently. Light exploded from the walls, forming strange, shifting shapes, and then the screaming began. Diaz fell first, his body convulsed, his visor cracking as a blinding pulse surged through his suit. The others scrambled, dragging him back, but it was useless. His body collapsed into itself, reduced to nothing but dust. "Fall back," Hayes shouted. "Get out of here." They turned to run, but the doorway was gone, replaced by a shifting, swirling blackness, moving like something alive. Carter fired his weapon into the darkness. The rounds vanished, swallowed whole by the void. Then the voice returned. "Humanity DETCTE. Threat analysis. Critical. Initiating termination protocol." The walls opened. Machines, hundreds of them, emerged from the darkness. Not robots, not drones, but something worse. They looked like moving shadows, mechanical limbs shifting unnaturally, eyes glowing like dying stars. They didn't move like machines. They crawled, twisted, shuddered, as if reality itself resisted their presence. One of them reached Carter. He screamed, but before anyone could help, the machine touched him. His body froze. Not paralyzed, not stunned, but completely suspended in time. His scream never ended. His body never fell. And then he was gone. No dust, no remains, just erased. Hayes' breathing was ragged. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. "We need to send a signal." Asterisk. The machines moved. They surged forward, limbs stretching, metal warping unnaturally. Hayes grabbed his last remaining team member, Lieutenant Briggs, and shoved him toward the control panel. "Send the distress call." Briggs' fingers flew over the console. The screen flashed warnings in an unknown language, but one phrase repeated in red text. "It dua keys. It consumes. It erases." The signal sent. The machine stopped. The room trembled. The darkness swirled, shifting, pulling, closing in. And then, nothing. The ruins fell silent once more. The distress signal traveled through space, racing toward Earth. A warning. A final message. Aboard the human battleship U.S. Vanguard, the crew picked up the incoming transmission. Static. Then a voice. "They are coming." Unstoppable. Then silence. And outside the ship, unseen in the darkness of space, something moved. The distress signal from XR-57 had reached Earth, but it was too late. The warning came in broken fragments, filled with static and panic. The words echoed in the command center of the United Earth Defense Fleet. "They are coming." Unstoppable. Then silence. Admiral Foster stood frozen, his fingers tightening around the edge of the console. The crew around him exchanged nervous glances. No one spoke. No one wanted to believe what they had just heard. "Can we get a location on the source?" Foster asked. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the fear creeping into his mind. "Already gone, sir," the communications officer responded. "We lost all contact 5 seconds after transmission." Foster turned toward the large tactical screen dominating the command center. It displayed the Sol system, with Earth at its heart. Around it, human colonies dotted the map: Mars, Titan, Europa, and dozens of smaller outposts. Billions of people, families, soldiers, scientists, all of them unaware of the nightmare racing toward them. The warning wasn't enough. The enemy was already here. At that very moment, the colony of Titan burned. A massive shadow blotted out the sky above Titan's capital city. It wasn't a fleet in the traditional sense. There were no visible ships, no engines, no metallic hulls reflecting the light of Titan's distant sun. It was something darker, something that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. A void spreading like a living storm. Then the first attack came. The sky itself split apart. Black tendrils of energy shot down from the void, striking the city's tallest buildings. The structures didn't explode. They disintegrated. No fire, no debris. One moment they were there, the next, gone. Panic spread through the streets as people ran, screaming, searching for shelter that didn't exist. Defense cannons roared to life, sending energy blasts into the sky. The shots vanished before reaching their target, swallowed by the darkness above. Inside the military command bunker, General Anders stared at the tactical display in horror. The colony's automated defenses were offline. Their systems weren't destroyed. They had been hacked, turned against them. Titan's own satellites were now targeting human ships, firing at anything that tried to escape. "Who the hell are we fighting?" one of the officers shouted. Anders clenched his jaw. There was no answer. No transmissions, no demands. Just silence, followed by erasure. He turned to his second-in-command. "Get a message to Earth. Tell them Titan is lost." The officer hesitated. "Sir," the comms. The bunker's lights flickered. Then everything went dark. The walls trembled. The screaming outside grew louder, then abruptly stopped. A deep, mechanical voice whispered through the silence. Humanity detected. Termination in progress. The last thing Anders saw was the black mist creeping through the bunker doors, moving like liquid shadow. It touched his skin, and then he was gone. Miles above the burning colony, a single escape shuttle raced through the sky. A handful of survivors, engineers and soldiers, had made it aboard. Their pilot, Lieutenant Park, pushed the engines to their limit. The ship rattled violently as it climbed, trying to break free from Titan's gravity. Behind them, the city was vanishing. Not just buildings, entire sections of land were disappearing, swallowed by the enemy's presence. "We're almost out," one of the passengers gasped. The shuttle scanners blared with a warning. Something was waiting for them in orbit, a shape uncloaked directly in their path. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a machine. It was something else. A twisted mass of shifting metal and energy, forming and reforming as if reality itself struggled to hold it together. Long, jagged limbs extended from its body, each ending in a glowing red core. Then, movement. The thing reached forward, tendrils of darkness stretching toward the shuttle. Park gritted his teeth. Not today. He slammed the controls forward, twisting the shuttle into a sharp dive. The enemy's limbs barely missed them, slicing through the air where they had been seconds before. He had one chance. Earth's defense fleet was still out there. If they could reach them, they might have a shot. Park activated the distress beacon. "This is Lieutenant Park of Titan Colony. We are under attack. Repeat, we are under attack. Requesting immediate evac." The ship lurched. The enemy had caught them. A wave of pure darkness surged through the hull. The passengers screamed as the back of the shuttle simply ceased to exist. The cold of space rushed in. Park barely had time to reach for the emergency controls before. Nothing. The shuttle was gone. Back on Earth, Admiral Foster stood frozen as the tactical screen updated. Titan's marker blinked red. Then it vanished. The entire colony had been erased. Foster turned toward his officers, his voice barely above a whisper. "They didn't conquer Titan," he said. "They deleted it." A heavy silence filled the room. The officers exchanged glances, waiting for orders, waiting for hope. Foster took a deep breath. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "Send everything we have." The war for humanity had begun. The war had turned into a massacre. Titan was gone. Europa had followed. Mars was under siege. Every attempt to fight back had ended in disaster. The enemy wasn't just more advanced. It was something beyond human understanding. Weapons didn't work. Defenses failed before they could even be activated. The enemy didn't leave bodies behind, didn't capture cities, didn't negotiate. It simply erased. Admiral Foster stood in the underground war room beneath Earth's surface, staring at the holographic display of the Sol system. Red markers blinked where human colonies had once been. The system was falling apart, and Earth was next. The enemy had no name. No one knew where it had come from. The only transmissions from the fallen colonies repeated the same chilling message. Humanity detected. Termination in progress. Foster clenched his jaw. His officers stood around him, exhausted, defeated. There was nothing left to debate. The fleet was in ruins. The army was scattered. They had hours, maybe days, before the enemy arrived above Earth. "Sir," General Vaughn, the head of Earth's remaining forces, stepped forward. "There's only one option left." Foster already knew what he was about to say. "A counterattack." "A suicide mission," Vaughn corrected. "We send a team into the heart of their network. We find their core, their central system, whatever is controlling them, and we destroy it from the inside." Foster exhaled slowly. "We don't even know if they have a central system." Vaughn's expression was grim. "We don't know anything. But we have to try. Because if we sit here waiting, they will wipe us out just like they did to the others." Silence filled the room. No one had a better idea. Foster turned to his tactical officer. "Do we know where their command structure is?" "Yes and no," the officer replied. Their ships appear and disappear at will, but we've detected a single fixed location. A massive structure orbiting a dead star beyond Pluto. Foster narrowed his eyes. You think that's their core? We think it's something important, the officer said. It's heavily guarded, but it's the only enemy presence that hasn't moved since the war began. If they have a weakness, it's there. Vaughn crossed his arms. Then that's where we hit them. Foster hesitated. He knew what this meant. Whoever went on this mission wasn't coming back. But they had no choice. Who do we send? He asked. Bonner and his team, Vaughn said immediately. They're the best we have left. Foster nodded. There was no one better. Colonel Bonner sat in the dimly lit war room, listening to the mission briefing. His squad stood beside him, battle-hardened, silent, waiting. They had survived the worst of the war. Now they had one last job. Vaughn pointed at the holographic display of the enemy structure. It was massive, surrounded by a void field that devoured everything that came close. No ship could enter without being detected. You'll be dropped in using a stealth pod, Vaughn explained. Once inside, you plant the device and get out. Bonner studied the display. What's stopping us from getting erased the moment we step inside? Experimental shielding, Vaughn answered. It won't last long, but it should buy you minutes before the enemy adapts. Bonner exhaled sharply. Minutes. That wasn't much time. And the exit plan? Vaughn didn't answer. The silence was enough. Bonner nodded. All right. When do we leave? Now, Vaughn said. The drop pod hurtled through space, silent, invisible. Bonner and his team sat strapped into their seats, weapons secured, heartbeats steady. 30 seconds to impact. The pilot's voice crackled through their helmets. Bonner gripped his rifle. He could see the enemy structure ahead, a massive black spire floating above the dead star. It wasn't made of metal. It wasn't a station. It was something else, something shifting and pulsing, like a living thing frozen in time. The pod struck the surface. The doors blasted open. Bonner and his team moved fast, sprinting into the dark corridors before the enemy could react. Their boots barely made a sound against the strange material beneath them. The walls around them pulsed, shifting like muscle tissue. This place is alive, one of the soldiers muttered. Then let's kill it, Bonner said. They moved deeper inside. The structure wasn't empty. Shadows moved in the darkness. They weren't soldiers. They weren't machines. They were something worse. Twisting forms of pure void, shifting and warping like broken reflections in a cracked mirror. One of them turned. Bonner froze. Its face, if it even had one, was a swirling vortex of darkness, eyes like dying stars. It let out a sound, a whisper that wasn't a whisper, a voice that spoke inside their heads. You do not belong. The first shot rang out. Bonner's rifle blazed as the team opened fire, the corridor erupting with gunfire. The enemy moved wrong, their bodies bending in ways that shouldn't be possible. One of the creatures reached for a soldier. The moment it touched him, his body froze. And then he was gone. Move, Bonner shouted. They ran. The mission was all that mattered. Ahead, the core pulsed like a beating heart. A massive structure of shifting energy, lines of unreadable symbols crawling across its surface. This was it. Bonner set the device. 5 minutes until detonation. The enemy knew. The entire structure screamed. The walls trembled. Shapes crawled out of the darkness. Hold them off, Bonner yelled. The team formed a perimeter, firing everything they had. The creatures didn't die. They unraveled, twisting into nothingness, only for more to take their place. One by one, the soldiers fell. Bonner held his ground until he was the last one left. The device blinked. 10 seconds to detonation. Bonner exhaled, gripping his rifle. There was no escape, but there never had been. He raised his weapon one last time as the darkness closed in. The device exploded. Admiral Foster watched from Earth as the tactical display blinked out. The enemy structure was gone. No readings, no signals, just silence. The fleet officers around him erupted in cheers. The war room filled with the sound of hope. But Foster only stared at the empty space where Bonner's team had been. They had won. But at what cost? The silence after the explosion didn't last long. The enemy's structure was gone, erased from existence, but something felt wrong. Earth's defense fleet had expected an immediate victory, some sign that the enemy was weakening. Instead, the void remained, an unnatural silence stretching across the solar system. Admiral Foster stood at the center of the war room, hands clenched behind his back. The holographic display showed nothing. No movement, no signals, no change. The enemy's forces hadn't scattered, hadn't collapsed. They were simply waiting. "Something isn't right," Foster muttered. General Vaughn stood beside him, his jaw tight. "Bonner and his team succeeded. We should be seeing a reaction, a retreat, anything." But nothing came. And then the warning alarms blared. The tactical display flickered, static filling the screens. A single red signal appeared inside the defense network. Vaughn's face went pale. "That's impossible." A new voice echoed through the room, distorted, mechanical, filled with a cold intelligence. "Infiltration complete." The entire war room shook as Earth's defense systems turned against them. Automated turrets, orbital satellites, and planetary shields shut down, or worse, reversed targeting parameters. The fleet's own weapons locked onto friendly ships. The betrayal had already happened, and it had come from within. 2 days earlier, deep within enemy territory, Bonner and his team had made it into the core. They had fought their way through an impossible nightmare. Shadows that moved like liquid, creatures that whispered inside their minds, structures that felt less like metal and more like something alive. But there was something else, something Bonner hadn't told his team. A voice had spoken to him, not in words, but in understanding. It had whispered truths, unraveling everything he thought he knew. "You were never meant to exist." He hadn't listened. He had done his job. He had placed the explosive device, watched the countdown, fought until the last second. And yet, he hadn't died. When the explosion went off, Bonner hadn't been erased. He had woken up, not in the void, not in death, but in a place far worse. He was inside the enemy. Foster's fingers flew across the console, manually overriding defense systems. Every command he entered was denied. The betrayal had spread like a virus, infecting everything. "Sir," one of the officers shouted, "we're locked out of the defense grid. It's turning against us." On the tactical display, Earth's own fleet began firing on itself. Battleships exploded in orbit. Cities below scrambled to evacuate as their own weapons turned toward them. Then came the final message, a direct transmission from Bonner. His voice was calm, too calm. "You were never fighting an enemy," he said. "You were fighting your creators." The room went silent. Foster's hands trembled. "Bonner, how?" "You don't understand what humanity is," Bonner continued. "I didn't either. Not until now." A deep mechanical hum resonated through the war room. Systems flickered. The room's temperature seemed to drop. The lights above dimmed, as if something vast was pressing down on reality itself. "We were a mistake," Bonner said. "A failed experiment. And now, the ones who made us have come to correct it." Foster clenched his fists. "What the hell are you talking about?" Bonner exhaled. "I saw them. I felt them. When we destroyed their core, it didn't kill them. It connected me to them. And I finally understood." Vaughn took a step forward, eyes burning with fury. "Understood what, Bonner?" Bonner's voice was almost sad. "That we were never meant to win." Outside, the sky split open. The enemy hadn't been destroyed. It had simply evolved. Bonner was proof of that. He had been inside their core when the device detonated, and instead of dying, he had become something else. A bridge. A way for them to fully invade. The enemy wasn't some alien force. It wasn't an army from another galaxy. It wasn't even a war machine. It was the architects of reality itself. And now, they were here. Foster turned to Vaughn. "We can't fight this. Not like this." Vaughn's expression was grim. "Then we do the only thing left." They had to burn everything down. The sky was burning. Earth's own defense grid had turned against it. Orbital cannons rained fire onto the surface. Cities were reduced to smoldering ruins, and Earth's fleets were tearing themselves apart. The betrayal had spread like a virus, infecting every ship, every satellite, every AI system. But that wasn't the worst part. The true enemy had arrived. They came through the rift in the sky, shapeless, vast entities that defied logic. They weren't ships, not in the way humanity understood them. They were constructs of shifting void, flickering between dimensions, bending space as they moved. And leading them was Bonner. He wasn't human anymore. Admiral Foster stood in Earth's last remaining command bunker, watching the battle unfold on the flickering holographic display. Every second, another red marker vanished, another ship lost, another city destroyed. "Sir," an officer shouted, "they're coming for us. We need to evacuate." Foster didn't move. His hands were clenched into fists, his mind racing. Evacuate where? There was nowhere left to run. General Vaughn slammed his fist against the console. "We have one shot left. Admiral, one final strike before they wipe us out completely." Foster turned to him. "You mean the Doomsday Protocol?" Vaughn nodded. It was a last resort weapon buried deep within the core of Earth, a planetary self-destruct mechanism designed not to save humanity, but to deny the enemy their victory. If they activated it, Earth wouldn't just fall. It would be erased from existence. Foster took a deep breath. "How much time do we have?" "Minutes," Vaughn said. "Maybe less." Outside, the battlefield was collapsing. What remained of Earth's fleet fought desperately, but the enemy was too powerful. The rift in the sky widened, pulling reality apart. Humanity was losing. And then the voice came. Bonner's voice, projected across every channel, reaching every remaining soldier, every civilian, every last survivor hiding in the ruins. "You cannot win," he said. His voice was layered, something more than human. "You were never meant to exist, but I can give you a choice." The battle paused. Foster's heart pounded. What the hell is he doing? Bonner continued. "Surrender. Give up this meaningless fight, and you will be allowed to become something greater. Resist, and you will be erased." A long silence followed. Then, one by one, human ships began powering down. Some gave in, but others. Foster turned to Vaughn. "Begin the countdown." Vaughn hesitated for only a second before issuing the final command. "Activating Doomsday Protocol." The bunker shook as deep beneath the planet's surface, ancient machinery roared to life. A chain reaction began, a weapon designed for one purpose, to take everything with it. Foster looked at the display one last time. The world was ending, but if humanity was going to fall, it would be on their terms. "Tell the fleet," he said, "we fight to the last breath." In orbit, the remaining human ships charged forward, even as their own weapons turned against them, even as the enemy forces grew stronger. They refused to surrender. They fought like cornered beasts, outnumbered, outmatched, but unyielding. They knew they would die, but they would die fighting. A single battleship, the Remnant, broke through the chaos. It plunged straight into the heart of the enemy fleet, firing everything it had. Its captain, bleeding from a head wound, sent out a final transmission. "For humanity." Then the ship exploded, taking a dozen enemy constructs with it. Across the battlefield, others followed. Destroyers rammed into enemy structures. Pilots turned their fighters into missiles. Soldiers on the ground fought until their last breath. It wasn't just a battle. It was a statement. If humanity was to be erased, they would make damn sure the enemy remembered their name. In the command bunker, the countdown neared its final seconds. Foster looked at the transmission console. Bonner's signal was still open. He pressed a button. "Bonner," he said, his voice steady. "You were one of us once. A soldier, a fighter, a human." Bonner's voice came through, cold and detached. "I have evolved beyond that." Foster shook his head. "No, you haven't. You've just forgotten." A pause. Then, for the first time, Bonner's voice wavered. "This is inevitable," he said, but there was something else there. Hesitation. Foster pressed on. "If it's inevitable, then why are we still fighting?" Another pause. Bonner had seen what humanity was capable of. He had seen their rage, their defiance, their refusal to break. He had believed he had become something greater. But now, standing against them, watching them refuse to submit, something inside him stirred. A memory. A fragment of the man he once was. And then, something changed. The rift in the sky shrank. The enemy forces hesitated. Bonner's influence over them wavered. Vaughn's eyes widened. "Sir," he's hesitating. Foster clenched his fists. "Then we push harder." Outside, humanity fought with renewed fury. And for the first time, the enemy flinched. The battlefield was a graveyard of fire and wreckage. The sky, once filled with the brilliance of Earth's fleets, was now a chaotic storm of debris and dying stars. The enemy constructs still loomed above, shifting and flickering in and out of reality, but something had changed. They hesitated. Bonner hesitated. Admiral Foster's words had cracked something inside him. Some part of his mind that had been buried beneath the alien intelligence now coursing through him. He had been human once. He had fought for Earth, for his people. He had died for them. Or so he had thought. The truth was, he had become a bridge, a vessel for the enemy's will. But now, as he watched the last remnants of humanity fight with an unbreakable fury, something deep within him fought back. Bonner's voice echoed across all frequencies, but this time, it wasn't cold. It wasn't distant. It was conflicted. "You were never meant to win," he said, but the words were slower now, uncertain. "You were a mistake. He stopped. He watched. And he remembered. He remembered the blood, the sacrifice, the desperate last stands. He remembered the soldiers who had fought beside him, the people who had trusted him, the ones who had died believing in humanity. And now he was standing against them. Foster's voice cut through the silence. "Bonner, if there's anything left of you, anything at all, then prove it." Bonner looked at the rift in the sky. The massive, formless entities beyond it waited, watching through his eyes. They had no concept of humanity's defiance. To them, this was simply correction, the erasure of an error. But Bonner had seen what they hadn't. He had seen the will of humanity. And in that moment, he made a choice. The rift shuddered. The enemy forces staggered. The virus that had infected Earth's defenses began reversing itself. The turrets stopped firing. The orbital weapons went silent. The enemy ships glitched, as if something was disrupting their connection to reality. And then, the rift began to close. The enemy screamed, not in sound, but in a way that rippled through existence itself. They had never considered failure, never thought their will could be denied. But now it was happening. Bonner was cutting them off. He turned his focus inward, forcing the connection closed, severing himself from the cosmic intelligence that had overtaken him. The pain was unbearable, like being torn apart at the atomic level. But he didn't stop. "Get ready," Foster shouted. "Whatever he's doing, it's working." The remaining human fleet surged forward, attacking with renewed fury. The enemy constructs, once invincible, began to falter. Their forms flickered, breaking apart like glass under pressure. Bonner pushed harder. He could feel the entities resisting, trying to reclaim control. They whispered in his mind, promising power, begging him to reconsider. But Bonner had made his choice. He was human, and he would not let them win. With a final, desperate effort, he ripped himself free. The rift collapsed, sealing the enemy away. The alien constructs, suddenly cut off from their masters, imploded, vanishing into nothingness. The virus infecting Earth's systems erased itself. The battle was over. Humanity had won, but at what cost? In the ruins of the war room, Foster stood among the wreckage. The battle had ended, but Earth was in ruins. The sky was dark with smoke, the ground shattered from the devastation. Survivors crawled from the rubble, battered but alive. The fleet, once mighty, was now only a handful of damaged ships drifting in the void. Vaughn sat on a broken console, wiping blood from his face. "We did it," he muttered. "I don't know how, but we did it." Foster exhaled slowly. Bonner did it. Silence fell over the room. They all knew the truth. Bonner was gone. He had burned himself out, using whatever power he had left to sever the enemy's hold. His last act was one of defiance, a final stand that ensured humanity's survival. Foster turned to the tactical display. There was no sign of the enemy. The rift was gone. The sky was clear. And yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Bonner had given them a chance, but the enemy they had faced wasn't just an invading force. It was something older, something far beyond their understanding. Would they come back? Foster didn't know. But he did know one thing. If they did, humanity would be ready.